Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. I have recently received my copy of Cursed City Nightwars. This was supposed to be a really exciting day where I got to put up an exciting video about one of my favourite games. Unfortunately, as I am sure most people are aware, this expansion has something of a shadow hanging over it. I don't want to dwell on that in this video, but for the sake of completeness, I will go over it quickly. First, this expansion requires new miniatures, but it doesn't have any in the box. If you look at the reverse of the box, it shows you all the contents, all the tokens and cards, and then it shows you all the miniatures you would actually need to buy if you wanted to play this expansion with all of the official pieces. And those miniatures do not come cheap. Incidentally, in case you don't know, some of these miniatures are on oversized bases. Radukar the Beast covers 4 spaces on the Cursed City game board, while Annika and Kritza cover 2. There are rules included in this expansion to explain how all of that works. It mainly involves those vampires squashing down in size when they move, and then expanding in size and flinging minions out of the way to make room when they finish their movement. The other big issue with this expansion is it sold out really quickly. Even worse, Games Workshop didn't have the stock to fulfill all of the pre-order obligations, and a lot of people had their pre-orders cancelled by third-party companies and by Games Workshop themselves. Honestly, the whole release was botched. There was even incorrect images for Nightwars on the Warhammer web store. I would be more surprised, but Games Workshop seem to be botching quite a few things recently. All this has once again soured a Cursed City release and left me in the awkward position of talking about a product that people can't easily acquire. In fact, I'm really only doing this video in the hope that Games Workshop will do a reprint. But let's forget that for a moment. Let's take a look at this expansion and see exactly what we are getting for our recommended retail price of £30. And just to be clear, I have seen people hoping this expansion was going to be more than meets the eye. People hoping there was more in the box than Games Workshop was showing. Well, there isn't, unless you count this card insert, which only exists to prevent the box from collapsing in transit. This expansion is in a thin card tuck box like other Quest expansions. The accompanying Quest book is a limp back saddle stitched booklet. There are no tokens to replace the miniatures that you need to play, and there is no secret envelope to open when you complete the campaign. What you see before you is everything. But that's enough about what the expansion isn't. Let's see what it is. First of all, you are getting rules for 4 new champions and 1 new type of minion. The new minions are Fellbats. Relatively slow with a move of 4, but they have 5 wounds, which is quite a lot for minions, and they have decent damage potential. They are also never pinned. And here's their empowered side. The most interesting thing about them is the carried off ability. One Fellbat will grab a hero and carry them away, and then all the other Fellbats will swarm that one hero. That is awesome. That's a really exciting, interesting rule. Thematic and scary as heck. I love that. Unfortunately, that's it for minions, and we are on to the champions. This is Kritza. He has a Gnaw Blade that deals damage that cannot be ignored or reduced. His Rat Tail Cloak lets him ignore damage on the roll of an 8+. He's never pinned, and he's a stinking coward that will always attack the most wounded hero. Here's the empowered side of his card. His behaviours are obnoxious actually. Rancid Whiff will stun and disease every hero on the same board tile, and then Kritza makes a weapon action and a charge action. The Boiling Swarm lets him make 1 weapon action followed by a charge, and then all the corpse rats advance. Finally, To Me My Children lets him make a weapon action and a charge, then respawn all the slain corpse rats, and then make an advanced action with all of those corpse rats. Lady Annika is next, and she has a really interesting mechanism associated with blood tokens. She has 2 sets of stats. She starts off using the first set, and when she gets 2 blood tokens she changes to the second set. In effect, she is gorging on blood, and once she has drank enough she gets slower and weaker. But then, when you hit her the blood spurts out, she loses a blood token and she becomes savage again. Her sword is her means of gaining blood tokens. When she inflicts damage she gains a token, which causes an additional wound on the target and heals her for 1 wound or grievous wound. She begins with no blood tokens, and until she has 2 tokens she also ignores all damage on the roll of a 5+. Oh, and she attacks every adjacent hero when she makes a weapon action. Here's the empowered side of her card. Note that her Flickering Nightmare ability lets her attack twice. That means she could effectively attack all the heroes twice in a single turn. She's a bit fighty. Next is Carmilla Dusang. She rolls all the dice when she attacks with her mace, and in addition to causing damage, her attacks stun. She ignores all damage on the roll of an 8+, gaining a bonus on that roll for each additional hero adjacent to her. Ulfenwatch and Felbats are all more powerful while she's around, and worst of all, while she is on the battlefield, no heroes can use empowerments. That sounds frustrating. Here is her empowered side. Her behaviour table is pretty nasty. Call out the Watch summons slain Ulfenwatch, Darkened Skies calls slain Felbats, Supernatural Summons calls both at the same time. Finally, we have Radukar the Beast. He lives up to his name with 20 wounds and a host of ridiculously powerful abilities. He reduces all incoming damage by 2, and you roll twice on the behaviour table for him. Speaking of the behaviour table, he has 3 different actions. Vampiric Fortitude allows him to remove all wounds or 2 grievous wounds, plus all ailments. Unleash the Hounds lets him attack with his pack of Varkos vampires who can attack at range. Finally, we have Torn Limb from Limb. If his target fails an agility test, they take 8 wounds. 8 wounds is enough to completely cripple a healthy hero or kill any hero that has already picked up damage. Sure, you roll for agility and you can also roll for defense on that damage, but even so, 8 wounds. That's just silly. Oh, and here's the back of the card showing the empowered side. By the way, the Nightwars campaign takes place entirely at night, so all of these enemies are empowered all of the time. Just in case you thought things might be too easy. Of course, for these enemies to turn up in games you need encounter cards for them. There are 6 new encounter cards in total, 1 for each of the vampires and then 2 for the fell beasts. The idea is when you start the Nightwars campaign you add Radukar and the 2 Felbats cards to your existing encounters deck from the core game. Then you add the encounter card for whichever of the 3 vampire lords you choose to hunt. The good thing is, there is nothing stopping you from using these encounters in the core game, whether you are playing the core game campaign or just a one-off dungeon plunge. Just add in any encounter card for enemies you would like to face and you're good to go. I quite often play one-off games of Cursed City, and it would be nice to have some Felbats to face to change things up a bit. Next we have new discovery cards. I have been waiting for new discovery cards for ages, so I'm excited about this. Unfortunately, it's not quite as exciting as it could have been. You only get 10 new treasures, all one-use disposable items. The other discovery cards comprise 2 traps, 3 crises, and 5 Realmstone cards. You are supposed to shuffle all of these into your existing discovery deck, and you can add them even if you are still playing through the core campaign. The extra crises and traps are just to keep the ratio right considering the number of new treasures and Realmstones that are being added, so overall you aren't changing the odds significantly. At least I don't think so, I didn't do the maths. But you are adding variety to the treasures. And I should point out, if you play the Nightwars campaign, there is a whole new table of crises to discover. Next we have empowerments, only 4 and they are all different, but you can add them into your game straight away even if you haven't made it to the Nightwars campaign yet. They all cost 14 Realmstones and they are all very powerful. The Corpsebane rune gives you +1 to melee weapons for each hostile you destroy that turn. The Pulse Rush engraving lets you discard any 3 action dice to make a free weapon action on every hostile on your tile, and the Hishmark Braid lets you roll the d8 for agility checks and lets you roll an agility test after your defense roll to reduce incoming damage by an additional 2 points. My favourite though is the Prey Step Weave. After you suffer damage, you immediately move to an empty space within 5 spaces. That's amazing. Unfortunately, there is only 1 of each of these new empowerments, which is a hard cap on how many you can have in play at any one time. The remaining cards in this expansion are all for use specifically in the new campaign. This is a set of elite trait cards. Characters who have reached level 5 can pick up a specialisation based on their class as they progress through the Nightwars campaign, and they will eventually gain 3 new traits in the career path they have selected. The Lore Masters can choose to become Oracles or Scholars, the Executioners can become Shadow Stalkers or Reapers, a Stalwart becomes a Maximal or a Primus, and Blades become Warlords or Blade Masters. I'm not going to go through all of those abilities here, I fear this video will already end up rather long. Next we have the Vampiric Power cards. There is a level 1 power card for each of the 3 Vampire Lords you intend to slay that grants them additional abilities. The 2 sealed envelopes contain new power cards. Each time a vampire dies, you open the next envelope. I'm not sure why the cards are in sealed envelopes. I think it's to prevent you from looking at what new powers the vampires will get and then using that information to choose which order to kill them in. It certainly doesn't seem as exciting to me as the sealed envelopes that awaited at the end of each Blackstone Fortress expansion, but hey, at least they are keeping the tradition alive somehow. Anyway, I haven't opened the envelopes, and I don't intend to in this video. The final card you get is just the dashboard for tracking the campaign. We'll talk about that in a moment. With all of the cards out of the way, the only other component we need to look at besides the quest book is the punch board. All of these tokens are used for the new campaign. You get 2 new small rooms that appear in some of the scenario maps. There are 12 lurking tokens, 3 hunting tokens and 3 decapitated tokens, 1 for each of the vampire lords. There are 3 items that you might find during a crisis, 2 blood tokens for Annika, a rat swarm token for crits as part of the campaign, and then a new set of lich gates with numbers on. These have been introduced because all of the new missions have random spawn points for reinforcements. You can easily use them for all of the maps in the core game campaign as well to spice things up. And there we go, that's it. Everything is excellent quality, thick cards, chunky tokens, bold colours, nice artwork. It looks slick. It also looks like not a lot of stuff for your money. But now we've looked at the components, or lack of components, it's time to consider the most important thing about this expansion, the new campaign. The expansion lives or dies, or undeads or dies, on how good that campaign is. And it's interesting. Obviously I haven't played it yet, but I have taken a good look through the campaign structure and all of the new types of journeys it entails, and it's worth mentioning, the assumption with this campaign is your heroes are at level 5. If they aren't, they are in for a world of pain. The basic premise is that a curse of unending night has fallen across Ulfenkarn, and that means every journey takes place at night and all enemies are automatically empowered. During this unnatural darkness, the heroes are all holed up in a little place called Haven, the headquarters for the Ulfenkarn resistance. Meanwhile, Radukar the Beast is prowling the streets like a feral animal, and 3 new vampires have arrived to stake their claim. The campaign structure is simple, much more straightforward than the campaign from the core game, and in certain ways it reminds me of Shadows over Hammerhal, additional White Dwarf content for Blackstone Fortress, and the final Ascension expansion for Blackstone Fortress. At the start of the campaign, you have a Doom score and a Victory score set to 0. If the Doom score ever reaches 7, or at least 5 heroes die, it's game over, but that Doom counter will only increase if you fail in a mission. Gone is the concept of carefully balancing influence and fear by hopping between different types of journeys. This time, you just pick missions, play them, and you either progress in the campaign or you fail. Simple. There are 3 different vampires, and for each you will undertake a special type of journey to disrupt their plans. Once you have caused enough trouble, you will fight the vampire and hopefully defeat it. So, first of all you select the vampire to hunt. From that point on, until the vampire is dead, you are only allowed to undertake the type of journey associated with that vampire. Each time you fail a journey, the Doom count goes up by 1. Each time you win a journey, you score a victory point. Once you have 3 points, you earn the right to face the vampire head on. This is a 2-part process. First, the vampire rocks up to Haven with an army and knocks on your door. You will have to fend off a stream of attacking enemies until you can secure a particular objective. People who made it to the end of Blackstone Fortress Ascension will probably draw some parallels there. One of the interesting things here is that depending on which vampire you have upset, you will have different special rules in play and a different way in which you determine if you have successfully fended off their attack. If you do survive this onslaught, you chase down the vampire for a final confrontation, which is, as you would imagine, a unique battle with special rules that reflect the nature of your foe. Once you have defeated a vampire, 2 things will happen. 1. You place a decapitated token on your quest board, indicating that that particular vampire has been defeated and you won't be able to play that type of mission again. 2. The surviving vampires become more powerful. Remember those vampiric power envelopes? Well, you open the next envelope in numerical order and apply the powers to the surviving vampires. No good deed goes unpunished. After that, you get to do something that is new for this expansion, but not something new to the Quest series. You get to go to town. Haven has a range of stores, taverns, and unusual NPCs that you will gradually unlock as you progress through the campaign. And between journeys, you can visit these places to gain different benefits. You could see a fortune teller, trade for new treasure items at the market, gamble your realm stones at the gambling den, and much more. This was an aspect of the original Warhammer Quest game back in 1995 and appeared again in Shadows over Hammerhal. A similar sort of thing was also added to the Blackstone Fortress annual. It's great to see it make a comeback here. Visiting Haven is a fun little aside. I like how it gives a little more life to the city and gives you something else to consider in between your adventures. I don't think it's quite as interesting as it could have been, mainly you end up getting realm stones which makes it a bit easier to get the best empowerments, but still I like it. Oh, and incidentally, this campaign does away with the idea of not being able to save your realm stones. Now you can store them up over several journeys to ensure you can buy the big expensive empowerments. You can also sell the weaker empowerments you don't want anymore. And that's how the campaign progresses. You select a vampire, you go on journeys to accumulate victory points, visiting Haven between each of those journeys, then you will defend Haven, then you will slay the vampire, then you will pick a new vampire and begin that whole cycle again. And finally, once you have defeated all 3 vampires, there is one final challenge. I will not say any more about that. So all told, the campaign is pretty extensive. I don't think there will be any complaints about the number of games you would need to play to complete it. In fact, it might be the opposite. It might be too many games. You are looking at a minimum of 5 battles per vampire, plus a final battle, and that's assuming you don't ever lose, which would force you to play additional journeys. You could be looking at more than 20 different journeys to get through the whole campaign. With that being the case, the new journey types you are going to undertake have to be good. I can't really speak about that with any certainty as I haven't played any yet, but looking through them it would seem that Games Workshop took to heart the idea that Cursed City was a bit too easy, so for this expansion they have just amped up the difficulty level. It's gone all the way up to 11. Let's take a slightly closer look at the 3 new journey types. First up we have Lady Annika. She has minions all over town snatching people up for her to feast on, so you have to undertake purge journeys to disrupt her supply chains. In these journeys at the start of the game you put out 8 lurk tokens. 4 are objects of interest and 4 are enemy groups. You only reveal the lurking tokens when you bring them into line of sight, at which time any enemies revealed have a chance to activate immediately. They are basically Space Hulk blips. The aim of the journey is to just kill hostile groups. Whenever you kill the last model in the group, you increase your score by 1, and then you randomly determine where the next group will appear. If the group will appear behind a closed gateway, it spawns as a new lurk token, otherwise it spawns as a normal enemy group. Kill 10 or more groups and escape to win. On the surface it seems okay, but there's this special rule where you have to move the Nightfall token 1 space clockwise in each Nightfall step, and once it reaches the space with the Night symbol, starving vermin appear. At this point, at the end of each Nightfall step, each hero automatically receives 2 wounds. Nothing they can do about it, just happens. I get it, it's a race against time. As the whole game takes place at night, there is no risk of enemies becoming empowered, so instead we tick down to the point where these vermin appear to wreak havoc instead. Fine. But I get some bad vibes off a rule like this. First of all, you are racing against time, but the mission is doing everything in its power to slow things down. The introduction of the lurk tokens means when new enemies spawn, they may not always spawn angry and ready to hunt you down. Instead, they will just sit there lurking. You have to go to find them, eating up precious time and actions. Furthermore, enemy groups that are driven off don't count towards your total, only the groups you completely eliminate. Fail a few attack rolls and enemies are going to scurry away, denying you victory points and dragging the game out. It seems a tall ask to completely eliminate that many groups in time when you also have to hunt them first. And once those vermin appear, that seems like a pretty obnoxious rule, just losing 2 wounds with no way to prevent it. Worst of all, the 2 wounds happen in the Nightfall step before the heroes roll their activation dice, so the game automatically denies you 1 action dice per round. That gives you fewer dice to roll, fewer actions to heal up, fewer actions to move, fewer actions to hunt the lurk tokens, and worst of all, fewer actions for attacking, which will potentially lead to more groups being driven off rather than wiped out. I'm just theory crafting here, but once you reach that stage of the journey, I get the sense it's going to be game over as you are entering into a death spiral with no easy way out. It's an interesting idea, I see what it's trying to do, but I'm not sure about this one yet. Next up we have Carmilla de Sang. She has spies everywhere and shrouds the city in a thick fog. To defeat her you will have to undertake sabotage journeys where you disrupt her network of spies by killing the little creatures that transport the messages for her, namely Diregoyles and Gnawbone Strays. That's right, we have a mission where our objective is to kill the cute little kitty cats and the cheeky chubby cherubs. The setup is pretty much the same as for the Purge missions, except there are now 3 different types of lurk tokens, those that spawn enemies, those that have objects of interest, and those that spawn diregoyles and kitties. The heroes have to find and kill 10 or more familiars to win. Again, there is a ticking time clock element. This time, if the Nightfall token reaches the space with the moon icon, a thick fog rolls in. From that point on, any critical hits become hits, any hits become misses. That's obnoxious. That's the kind of rule that makes the best part of the game, the fast, deadly combat, slow and laborious. It's going to be incredibly difficult to kill anything, causing the whole game to drag. The third vampire is Kritza. He has lots of princely properties around the city, and to lure him out you must destroy those properties in pillage journeys. This is an adapted version of the Deliverance missions from the core campaign and plays out in much the same way, so if you didn't like those missions where you were running away from the endless spell, you probably won't like these either. To defeat Kritza you run through the city revealing tiles. On tiles with a shield symbol, you can stand next to an object of interest and make a special raise action. If you do, you remove the object. Do that 10 times and you win. As with Deliverance missions, you are being chased, this time by a swarm of rats. If they catch you, they inflict 3 wounds and bounce you into the next room. There's not really anything new here, and I have to say it's a bit surprising to see a mission type that is basically a retread of a significant part of the core game experience. So, that's an overview of the 3 new types of journeys. I'm not going to go into the specifics of the Haven defences or the decapitation missions for the vampires. Those are unique encounters, each with their own special rules, but you can expect to see things like bosses that just keep respawning after you kill them, missions where all the heroes start off diseased, which is particularly mean considering how difficult it is to remove status tokens in this game, and beat the clock missions versus enemies that just want to run away. There's definitely some interesting ideas in there, and I can't fault the amount of extra gameplay the new campaign introduces. If you can get 15 to 20 more games out of your copy of Cursed City, that's not too bad at all, and on top of that you are getting new items and empowerments. It's definitely a bit disappointing that this expansion only introduced 1 new type of minion. I would have loved to see a few new hostile types, because after exploring Ulfenkarn for all this time, I'm getting a bit fed up of the same old skeletons and zombies. It would have been great to explore one of the new areas of the city mentioned in the rules, like the Clot where the cannibal flesh eaters live, or the haunted Geistgale. Of course, it's also disappointing that we didn't get any new miniatures in this pack. I really don't see why Games Workshop did not include the Fell Beasts at least. If they had included a set of 3 Fell Beasts and then cardboard tokens for the 4 new bosses, that would have been perfect, and I don't think anybody really would have complained. But of course, Games Workshop aren't going to provide a way to easily substitute the purchase of miniatures, so we are left with a box with no miniatures at all. Anyway, all of the journeys in this expansion do add something new, with Kritza pillage missions being the least interesting of the 3, and I think there are enough little twists to keep players engaged. Introducing Haven not just as a place to go shopping but as a place you must defend is actually a little bit inspired, and the overall structure of the campaign is more straightforward and far less annoying than the campaign from the core game that involved constantly delaying what you wanted to do in order to control influence and fear. But I do have concerns that some of the rules introduced to up the difficulty might end up simply making games drag on longer than they need to. When all the heroes have their hits turned into misses, they all automatically take damage, they lose all their special powers, or something happens to arbitrarily deny them the resources they normally have access to, it's very easy to stray across a line between challenging and frustrating. And speaking of frustrating, I'm not going to ruin the ending of the campaign here, but I did skip to the end to check out what happened for science. There's a cliffhanger ending and a suggestion the story will continue. There is definitely an implication that there is another expansion on the way. But is there a point? A lot of people who wanted this one couldn't get it. Are those people going to want the next expansion continuing a story they weren't even a part of? And what happens when Games Workshop seriously underproduced that next expansion too, and the cycle continues? Cursed City has become a great frustration for me as a board gamer. It is the game that could have been amazing, the game that had all the potential. I once thought the reprint and this expansion marked a new beginning, a second chance, but Games Workshop caught me out again. Will I get excited if they announce another Cursed City expansion? Almost certainly. What can I say? I'm a sucker. But let me know in the comments what you think, and do please remember these are only my first impressions from reading through the whole campaign and all of the cards. Also, please let me know if you would like a follow-up video where I go through the new discovery cards, empowerments and traits in more detail and open those vampiric power envelopes. Otherwise, that's it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.